Hi, it's time for a chime video. So what we have here is a NuTone model K44 door chime that was made in 1947. And you know it's 1947 because for a change, it's actually stamped on the base. It says 47. So this is what we refer to as an early K model chimes. K model chimes were made approximately between 1947 and the end of 1958, 1959, depending on what model it is, because they weren't all updated. After K model chimes came L model chimes. Early K model chimes are the chimes that they made in 1947, 1948, and 1949. And they are distinctly different than the K model chimes that they started making in 1950. So the early K model chimes are more closely related to the chimes that NuTone made between 1936 and the end of 1942 than they are to the chimes that they made 1950 or later. And the reason that is because there was that brief interruption of production between 1943 and sometime in end of 46 or beginning of 47. There was that whole World War II thing that went on, and NuTone didn't manufacture any chimes during that time because they did war production like most manufacturers did. So this 1947 chime was sent in by a customer for repair. It has certain problems that made it difficult or impractical to try to repair as it was when he sent it to me. And I called to discuss this with him, and I had a hard time getting the details across well enough that it was really clear as to what I was talking about. And that's what this video is going to be about. And it's all about these. These are the solenoids and the plungers and springs and things that make up the solenoid assemblies for early K model chimes as compared to later K model chimes. So here are our 4 solenoids, one for each tube, because it's a 4-tube chime. We're going to put 3 of these aside because we only need really one to talk about it. So here's our 1 solenoid. So what is a solenoid? It's an electromagnetic coil. It has a brass tube that goes through the center of it, and inside, and it's got 2 wires that connect the coil to power in the chime base. Inside the brass tube, there will be a plunger and a spring and an end cap and a cushion and other little miscellaneous parts. These work entirely differently than the ones that they made starting in 1950. And so let me get a 1950 one here also, and we'll put it next to it. So here's one from a late K model chime. Now they look a lot alike, but they're different. The problem with this customer's early K model chime is that the springs on the plungers are all mangled and stretched out. And I know it's kind of hard to see here, so I'm going to put up a picture, which is the picture I sent to him in an email to illustrate what I was talking about. And as you can see in that picture, I've ordered the 4 plungers from, the first one is good, the next one is not bad, the third one is not good, and the bottom one, the 4th one, is very bad. And if you look very carefully at them, you can see as you go from top to bottom, the springs become more and more mangled as you go down. And the problem with this is, and these are entirely different than the ones they made starting in 1950. When this assembly is put together, the spring is attached, as you can see in the picture, to the back end of the plunger. And the front of the plunger has the tip on it. Now, we'll just briefly talk about the tips. The tips on these early ones, they were made out of some sort of leather type material. I don't know exactly what it is, and there is no one to ask anymore, so I'm unsure about that. And the problem also with these are that over time, because you have to consider that this chime is nearly 80 years old, people have squirted stuff into the solenoids probably to try to clean them, and it's some lighter fluid or some kind of chemicals or something, and it's caused the leather tips to become very hard and brittle, and some of them are broken off and it's not in good shape at all. Anyway, back to this. So you have the solenoid, the long part of the tube is the back, and the way these early ones are made, the plunger with the spring on the back of it goes in with the spring behind the plunger. And then ultimately there's a little felt cushion, and then there's a brass cap that fits down over the spring and holds it to the back edge of the tube like that. So these types of early solenoid assemblies use what are called extension springs. So when power is applied to the coil, it causes the plunger to shoot out. It stretches out the spring, and then the plunger hits the tube, and then when the solenoid turns off, the tension in the spring pulls the plunger back in. That's the way it's supposed to work. I still remember the very first time I ever worked on one of these, which was probably like 35, 38 years ago. And I had worked on a lot of NuTone chimes at that point, but none like this. And I thought to myself, and I still remember, it's like, who the heck designed this thing? Because this is crazy. This is like a crazy way to do this, because the extension spring idea is not a good idea. The other thing about this is, and this is a problem that occurs as products get older and people are unaware of what to do. When these early K model chimes were made new and you would buy one, across the front of the chime base, across where the plungers pop out, there was a piece of paper that was taped over it, and it stated very clearly, do not ring the chime without the tubes in place, because the tubes are the stops for the plungers, because the plunger pops out, it strikes the tube, can't go any further, and then the spring pulls it back in. If you activate the chime without any tubes in place, the plunger is going to pop out, and if it detaches from the spring, it's going to shoot across the room, roll on the floor, roll down inside the heat vent, and get lost. So that's a problem. And people, you may know that if you bought the chime new, but 40 years later, there's no instructions and nobody knows, and they take the tubes down and things fall apart. This is not good. The problem with fixing this, I'll take this back apart, and if you refer back to the picture, these springs, these extension springs, or as you see in the picture, they're not available. They have never been available in the amount of time that I've been a NuTone Service Center, which is almost 40 years. And because these type of springs, these extension springs, are only used on chimes that NuTone made for a 3-year period, it's too expensive to have the spring company make copy springs or make genuine replacement springs, because when you have custom springs made, the absolute minimum order for springs is 100 springs. And since we only see maybe 1 or 2 chimes like this each year, 100 springs is a lifetime supply. Can't justify tying up the cost to have 100 springs made, and also the cost per spring goes way, way, way up when you do that, because they have to set up the machine and do all these things, which cost money, and then have only 100 springs made. The springs become overly expensive and there's no demand for them, so you can't do that. So I told the customer, as these are now, these are not usable. There is no way to fix this. It's all mangled and stretched out, and that's the way it's always going to be. So I told him the only option was to make a hybrid chime. What that means is we're going to replace the original solenoid springs and plungers that came on his early K model chime with solenoids, springs, and plungers from a later K model chime. And we have these because I buy up the most ugly, broken, beat up NuTone Door chimes I can find, and those chimes, unfortunately, or fortunately in this guy's case, they become parts chimes. These solenoids that I put in his chime, because I've already done the replacement here, they came from a K40 chime that was from like 1955. It was all beat up and the cover was broken and the tubes were all dented, and no one would ever want to restore it, so it becomes a parts unit. And it gave up its solenoids and plungers for this fella's early K model chime. And the way these work are entirely different. So while the solenoids look the same and they are 90% similar, they are very slightly different. And the differences are the coils are somewhat larger, so they're somewhat more powerful. And the front ends of the tubes are not open, so the plunger can't fly out. They're folded over with an opening for the tip. So if you drop a plunger in, it doesn't fall through. It stops. See, the tip sticks out, but it can't go any further. And when these are assembled, they assemble differently than the other ones in that the spring goes in first, the plungers go in second, then you put a little cushion, and then you put the rear cap on to hold it all together. This is just one I grabbed out of a parts bin, so it's not the cleanest, most ideal one. And then it works differently in that when power is supplied to the coil and it makes the electromagnetic force, it forces the plunger to pop out the front. You saw the red tip before. And as the plunger goes forward, it compresses the spring. Instead of an extension spring, it's a compression spring, so it squeezes it down. And then when the coil turns off, the force that's been built up in the spring pushes the plunger back into the back of the tube. This is a better design because the spring isn't going to get stretched out. Now, I'm not going to say that the springs don't wear out, because they do, and they lose their tension over time, and they don't push the plungers all the way into the back of the tube, which is very important because the plunger has to be in the back of the tube, so when the solenoid turns on, it has enough space to run up and build up force to strike the tube properly. So it is important, and the springs do wear out. However, since these type of springs were used in chimes that they made for nearly 10 years, there's a big demand for them. So if you have an early K model chime, 1947, 1948, or 1949, and the springs are all mangled like you see in the picture, then it's going to be a more difficult repair to do, because odds are the solenoids are going to have to be replaced. Like I said before, we don't see that many of the early K model chimes, maybe 1 or 2 a year, and that's about it. So it's not a huge problem. So this video is primarily for those few people that contact us with an early K model chime that have mangled springs or missing springs, or sometimes missing plungers. Get people that contact us and it's like, well, one of the plungers is missing, and this plunger is distinctly different than the plunger in the later one, the one with the red tip, because it's made differently. It has a different kind of tip. It's got the little piece on the back where the spring attaches, and these are also like impossibly difficult to find because it's just a rare item in today's world. They didn't make them for that long, and who knows how many of them are actually left. So that's some of the ins and outs of trying to repair an early NuTone K model 4-tube, 8-note, long tube door chime. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.